So why don't we begin? Okay, so this is project prioritization and sustainability. It's okay, and development. Sorry, it's okay, Shannon. It's okay.
You let me know, just, let me know next. So
Okay, all right. So we always like to call this how to prioritize school projects and keep them going. Next. And you've met us. Okay, so we always like to talk about the successful elements of projects that you're thinking about. So the first thing that you should consider in any type of project that you want to consider, whether it be classroom-based, school-based, meaning it affects not just, yourself and your classroom, but also the potential of your entire school. Okay. We always think that, if it's possible, doing larger projects is nice, but also to recognize that, there's a lot of moving pieces. And one of those is stakeholders. And stakeholders is a very wide group. So it may be the immediate school staff, parents, students, even your alumni, but it also impacts, the local community groups, nonprofit, and even elected officials. And please remember that your number one stakeholder always is your principal. And in the school district of Philadelphia, any type of school project that's going to go on, you should really always have your school principal be on board with your project, because if your project is not a priority to the school, it's not necessarily going to be successful, and it may take longer. Okay. And so we always say, please keep your principal in the loop. Please talk to your principal about your potential projects that you're interested in doing. And the other part that we talk about is having that engaging discussion. Okay. And we also have to remember that folks that represent different parts of your school, and that could be a student, that could be a parent, that could be a local community group who may, be located across the street from you or down the street from you. Please consider really having that engaging conversation and talking about, what you see as potential project ideas for your school. And I bet you they also have ideas about what projects that they may be interested in or wanting to engage in. And we always like to say, please consider the needs of not just your principal, but also the staffers and the students, because that's really important. Because, let's make sure that any projects that we consider embarking on have all the stakeholders involved, getting that engaging discussion so that we can hear the different voices and the different needs. Okay. Thank you, Shannon. Okay. The parameters for best practices. You might want to consider, how long is this project going to take? Do you want to be involved in a project that goes from on paper all the way to being actually implemented? What type of role do you think that you can achieve with this priority project? What type of skills that what you may have that can make this project happen? And sometimes those examples are, do you have writing skills that you might want to use in grant writing? Are you good with numbers? That may be useful in, keeping track of the monies that your project raises. Are you comfortable with organizing groups? And so we believe not everybody has all of these skills, but you might have a skill and you might have something that you really enjoy doing. I encounter groups, school groups who actually, school community groups who tell me, they're really good at grant writing, but they may not be good at fundraising. But then I encounter folks who are like, I enjoy making meetings. I enjoy, coordinating meetings. So these are something that you may want to consider. Okay. Next slide. So any type of successful project, you always have to consider sustainability. And that means thinking about it from the beginning. It means sustainability means keeping your project going after 1 year, not just like after a few months. And sustainability is two parts: funds for maintenance or needed supplies, and part two, people to keep the project going. And a really good example is a school garden, which is, doesn't require a lot of money, but it has a lot of different parts to it. So a school garden, and some of our schools here on the call might already have a school garden. Many of our schools across the city actually have school gardens, both public, private, charter, etc. So I have schools who come to me and they raise the money for a school garden, and that school garden, it might cost $2,000. Okay. And we talk about including different stakeholders. So that might include teachers who want to teach STEM curricula, or nutrition, or taste testing, or even agriculture in related to a school garden. So you can imagine the number of stakeholders. Please also consider, if you're going to keep the garden going alive, you also have another stakeholder that you may want to engage, and that might be your building engineer, for that matter, and besides your principal. Okay. So we have heard terrible stories where not enough stakeholders were actually engaged and the garden falls apart, whether it be accidentally a building engineer mowing down the school garden because he or she may not have understood what the purpose of that garden was. Folks forgetting to water their garden. Okay. So even though you might get $2,000 for a garden, and that might pay for small gardening tools for the kids, regular size for the adults. Then you have who's planting, who's doing seeding, who's doing the weeding, who's doing harvesting. You can imagine that's a lot to do. Okay. But we always tell schools, what are you going to do after a few months? So you should consider, also raising a little bit of money, or considering you're going to need additional supplies for. I've had schools call me and say that the tools were stolen. So that means, did you need a safe space? To consider where those tools are put in. I had schools one time tell me that it wasn't watered enough. So does that mean that you might need somebody on the weekend watering and weeding the garden? So there's a bit of moving parts, but if you can keep this going, for more than a year, and when the kids return, let's say, if your garden's successful through May, and if you can keep somebody maintaining it even during the summertime, besides the weekends, come September, you're going to have a beautiful garden that's still thriving and that your students can still utilize. Next, Shannon. Okay. Successful projects are expensive. Remember, projects are always more expensive than you can imagine. Okay. I've had schools tell me that they wanted a $10,000 garden. And that means a lot of maintenance, because 10,000 is a lot more. I mean, it's a different group of types of plants. So you need to really consider, can you scale your project to being a little bit smaller? That might be more reasonable for you if you're raising the funds, if you're if you're engaging, if you engage a lot of stakeholders, 10,000 might require a lot more, work for that matter. Consider projects that are important to students, teachers, and principals, related to classroom learning. So we have a lot of schools who do school gardens as an example, because they can do STEM, they can take classroom learning and actually have it as hands-on learning outside. Okay. We have a lot of schools lately doing a lot of PBIS projects. Okay. A lot of times those are the PBIS rewards, which may be field trips, having a PBIS store. We always like to say, focus on the small ones and then go to the larger ones, because if you can accomplish the smaller ones, it'll be easier. I have had schools do large projects in the multi-millions of dollars, and then they were not successful in raising their money. And then because it wasn't successful, a lot of stakeholders got angry, and they got angry at each other. And this includes principals, okay, and assistant principals, and then the project goes bust. Okay, I've actually heard of schools who actually concentrated and tried to do a large schoolyard, and when it didn't happen within 2 years, teachers started leaving, people were angry, parents got angry. Okay, so that's why we try to tell you, we try to let you know that if you start small, then at least you can start to see that, you know, that you can do this and progress to potentially larger projects. We always like to say, if you make a priority list of 10 projects, it would be easier because, you know, getting things down on paper is so important. I have a lot of schools who come to me and say, I want to achieve, you know, all of these projects by next month. And we tell schools, you know, let's be realistic with everybody's time frame, as well as gathering all the stakeholders for input. And of course, you know, keeping your principal, you know, and getting the principal to get on board with the project. Please consider what you can achieve versus what you'd like to achieve. And realistically, my experience is that we have schools that can take 3 projects off of their priority list, and that can be achieved in 1 year. I've never seen a school do all 10 projects in 1 year. I mean, that's going to require a lot of effort. I mean, beyond what the school can do, beyond what the Office of Grant Development can help you with. So you might want to really think about and you know, consider making a list of 10. Shannon.
Okay, so now we're going to do, we're going to move into an activity. We're going to do a simple but effective activity to really help you guys get your project ideas out of your head onto paper, and then hopefully you can, you know, implement them into your school. So you're going to take a sheet of paper. You could have a physical sheet of paper, or you can open up a Word document or Google Doc, and you're going to number the document from 1 to 10. So number 1 is going to be the greatest need of what you think your school needs. And 10 is going to be the least important. So just like Laura said, usually schools can achieve up to 3 projects a year, sometimes more if you have a really great and motivated staff, but it's a lot of work to get these projects done, especially if they're larger scale. So when you're numbering your list, you want to think about the stakeholders, project roles. So who's doing what? Are you having volunteers? Are these going to be staff members that are going to be committing their time to helping this project get implemented? And then you want to think about sustainability. So I get, Laura, do you think we should do this activity for about 15 minutes? I think our cutoff is 10:45. So I just want to make sure we have enough time to debrief the activity and then go into everything else.
I agree, Shannon. That sounds like a good time frame. And if when folks are doing the activity, if you have questions, you can certainly ask us when you're doing the activity too.
Yeah,
Thanks, Shannon.
definitely. Any questions in the chat? So I guess it's 10:20 now, or 10:19, but for time's sake, 10:20. So we'll take about 15 minutes to get a list of 10, and then we can come back and briefly talk about any project ideas you have or questions or concerns, and then we'll keep it going. So feel free to pop questions in the chat if you have any, or come off of mute as you're working through the activity. Laura, there's a question in the chat that I think would be good for you. I can also answer it, but I think you might have more insight.
So the question is from Jessica, and she writes, I guess I'm wondering first and foremost where money's come from and how to think about that. So the reason why we didn't do a centric around money is because it gets people really upset. And once they realize, believe it or not, doing prioritization is actually the hardest part than actually getting the monies. The monies actually are not that hard. And the Office of Grant Development can actually have a session about that and talk with you about that and get an appointment. But so that's why we always ask schools to consider writing a list of 10 priorities, because you might have some small things, let's say like, if you have a school garden, that might be smaller, right, in potential about cost compared to if you actually put down an outdoor classroom. Because an outdoor classroom has the potential to be much more money than, because it's larger. You might have more classes involved. I've worked with schools who tell me they need 3 outdoor classrooms, and so you can imagine the number of kids that would be out there. So my point being is that we want you to not focus so much on the money, but trying to get your ideas on paper, because that's going to help you really, really think out potentially what your school could benefit from, rather than always focusing on the money and then getting caught up in the money. I have schools that get so caught up in the money that they forgot about the stakeholders. Okay. And that's not just,
I guess I just am wondering, like, if you're the Office of Grant Writing, I'm like, first and foremost, I need to understand that I will be trying to write a grant, and like to who I am trying to write this grant to. And I just don't feel like we talked about that at all. So like, I don't think that I need like some exorbitant amount of money or anything like that. I just am wondering, like, there's a difference between fundraising or writing a grant to someone who is, offering a grant potentially. So I guess like we didn't talk about that. So I just,
and thank
sounds
you
like
very
you're talking about doing both potentially.
So thank you very much, Jessica, for bringing this up. So believe it or not, the majority of the time for projects at schools are actually not based on grant writing. They tend to be a very small percentage. Okay. When you apply for grants, there's a time frame in which you have to use the money, and it's always much shorter than most of our projects can actually do. So, there are garden grants, and because those are very small, around anywhere from $500 to $2,000. There are so that might be achievable. But if you're looking at a much larger project where you're going to have to not get that project to fruition and success for 2, 3, 4 years, okay, grant writing does not make sense. Okay, a lot of times our schools are actually getting their money from corporate partnerships, from nonprofits in their neighborhoods, and they're doing fundraising, and they're doing crowdfunding. Crowdfunding, not just the donors choose for teacher classrooms, but the principal is doing crowdfunding with the district's foundation, which is known as the Fund for the School District of Philadelphia. The fund has every single one of our public schools actually has a crowdfunding site that uses principal priority projects, and that's how they're getting the money. Okay, so it's a very varied way where how projects are getting funded.
It's complex.
It is complex. So that's why we ask people to do priority setting. We get a lot of schools who come to us and they've never done priority setting, and they tell us that the number one thing they want is it might be a very large project, and they might tell us it's a greenhouse.
Okay.
And then we find out that the school has never done gardening. So that's why we often we want people to actually start the conversation with us by doing a priority list.
Okay. Gotcha.
Jessica, don't be dissuaded. I've written grants, I've done donor shoes, I've done all the ways to get funding possible. It's not as big sometimes as you're probably imagining in your head. So like she's talking about a gardening grant. I did a bee grant one year, and it was like a small application. Some of them are like small and some of them are a little bit larger, but don't be dissuaded by the it sounds like it's a hard process because that's not always the case. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. It's depending on what you're trying to do for your school. Do you know what kind of project you want to do?
Yes.
What kind of project do you want to do?
I'm doing, I mean, my priorities are healthy snack funding and, I run groups on anti-violence and healthy masculinity, and I want to fund my co-facilitator, who is a community organizer.
All right. Do you have Eat Right Now at your school?
We do.
All right. So like those are ones that you could get partnerships with probably that would give you funding. So like write your priority list. And then if we have time at the end, we can chat a little bit because I've done something similar at the schools that I've been at.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And I also want to add, well, this is just for everyone. The Office of Grant Development does produce a grants newsletter that is meant for school-based staff, because when you think about the grants world, there's the larger ones that are, can be in the six figures, millions of dollars, probably not the most ideal for a school-based person to apply for, but then we do curate a list of grants that are $10,000 and under that have simpler applications for school-based folks to apply to. So I'm happy to share that at the end. When I stop sharing my screen, I'll pull it up and put it in the chat. Laura, I think it might be okay, just to start a quick debriefing conversation in case there's questions or concerns. I want to be mindful of everyone's time, so we get them out at 10:45.
Okay. Is anyone really, does anyone want to start sharing their list with us?
Or you don't have to share, I guess, your whole list, but if you have questions or concerns, or, if there's a project, if there's an idea that you have, but maybe a project that you can't figure out that aligns with the idea or the problem you want to solve. And if not, that's okay too.
Diane, did you want to start? Not meaning to put you on the spot, but you texted, but you chatted with us and said you are.
Sure. Oh my gosh, the light just shining on me, but looks like I'm in jail. I had an easy time kind of making this list because my charter school is rooted in service learning, and a few members and I are trying to revamp our service learning. So one of my top priorities is actually leading a professional development at the end of the month to our K-12 staff on what we've done in the past, what our plans are for this year, and then our goals for the future. So the staff PD was kind of my top priority. And then I've been partnered with the National Youth Leadership Council for a couple of years, especially through my school. And I applied for a grant that's going to allow us to do an education equity focus for service learning. So I've got two ladies who are trying to lead this lunch leaders program, in which they're recruiting 7th and 8th grade students to then help teachers during their lunch. And then we're hoping to normalize it so that we can provide these trainings and reflections moving forward.
That sounds fantastic. So it looks like you're really trying to make this huge school-wide impact, not just for students, but also on the PD end, so that everybody is actually on the same page. Am I correct?
Correct. And
Okay.
A lot of people feel like, oh, service learning, you have to go big and work with international partnerships. But for a lot of the post-pandemic world, our students are actually very much in need. And so we're prioritizing our school as the community partnership, knowing that we have a K-8 campus and a high school campus, and that can lead to some fruitful methods for both of us.
So in your respect, as Teresa was alluding to when when we were talking with Jessica, this is where sometimes that in-kind partnership thing would work out better for you than necessarily actually getting cash. And sometimes in-kind partnerships, like with your local community groups, like your local, what are they called? Local community-based organizations. Sometimes those are the best ones that actually can support your initiatives that are school-wide, because a lot of times they want to do service learning. They want to see teachers being, that teachers are also included, and that, there are successful projects. So you might want to consider reaching out to them, because I have worked with a lot of schools who actually got a lot of in-kind, and then suddenly the local community group was so happy, they actually gave them a cash grant or a cash donation where it was possible to get their work done.
Yeah.
Okay, but thank you very much for sharing that with us. Is there anybody else who wants to share their list or some of their ideas that they're thinking about for their school?
I guess I can go back to my priority of trying to pay my co-facilitator, who is a community organizer. He does have a nonprofit, but I don't really want him to take monies from his nonprofit. I'd rather have the district pay to have him do this programming with me that I have a curriculum for, but I just need, somebody who is just like a leader, a good leader in the community to work with me and the relationships with the students. So I did start looking into doing a vendor kind of registration for him to see if I could get like funding through the district. But it doesn't seem like a super easy, understandable process, just in that I did see a bid go out for like anti-violence work. But I think that the time frame has passed on the bid, and I don't really understand like the whole process for applying to that bid, and certainly neither does my friend, so.
So, if this is a priority for your principal, okay, your life will be easier, right?
She's
Um,
supportive.
My experience is that, so I know exactly what bid you were talking about. That was to after-school providers. Okay.
Okay.
And you are correct, that that bid has ended now. I don't know the results of it because that's in many other departments. I would consider, if you would like to, actually to reach out to your elected officials to get that project funded.
Okay.
Believe it or not, we get a lot of schools now who are reaching out to their elected officials to get programs started. And sometimes to be funded not just for this year, but the following year, because sometimes state grants are quite large and they can actually go beyond 1 year. So that might help you with your sustainability, especially if it's a project that can be, that you can get the funds from a state representative or an elected official, that if it expands for 2 years, right, then you don't have to worry immediately. Then you don't have like this immediate concern, like, oh my God, the project's going to end in 3 months.
Yeah.
But you might have greater impact. Do you see what I mean? If you do
Yeah.
more than 1 year.
And I know my elected officials in South Philadelphia, where I live and where my friend has his organization, but I'm in Port Richmond and we are a citywide school. So that has been kind of a barrier for me in terms of stakeholders in the area. And I don't know, does it matter if can I seek out my elected officials in South Philly, or should I really do it in Port Richmond?
So you should consider the elected officials where your school is located, okay? Because many of our elected officials do support our schools where they are, where their district is, whether it be city council, state representatives, state senators, okay?
Yeah.
And if you would, Jessica, if you want that, you want to have a larger conversation with us, and we welcome to also include your principal as well as that person from the nonprofit, you can actually make an appointment with us and we can have a greater conversation about how to do that. Because we actually we do this all the time with schools. We have schools that I actually worked on their applications in the fall, and they were just awarded their they were just awarded their money, on paper. And so now they're just waiting for the check. And this is going to impact the school, I believe, all the way through spring and beyond, because
Awesome.
of the way they plan their project.
Okay.
Okay.
So much.
Thank you.
Laura, that's the perfect transition into the next slide, because I know we have about 5 more minutes left. So
Shannon, we can just leave like maybe about 2 or 3 minutes at the end so I can go over the survey for feedback.
Okay. All right. So where do we go from here? And you are welcome to make an appointment with the Office of Grant Development. Okay. We'll review your school priority list, and you'll get a grant writer to do that with you. And then what we'll do is we'll actually take you to the next stage of actually getting your priority idea and putting it within the project idea worksheet, where we talk about to get your answers for the who, what, why, when of your proposal. And these are this is actually a very helpful and even larger exercise that helps you actually be successful for your projects. And we have actually had great results with both offices in the administration as well as with school sites. And so, we want to help you succeed on your projects, and so you're welcome to get in touch with us to go to the next level. Next slide, Shannon. Okay, so now we're going to do a plug. Okay, so School District of Philadelphia schools are welcome to apply for the next cohort for School Resource Academy, in which we do this and even more. And our aim is to help you raise monies for your school priorities, as well as develop a network of wealth supporters so that your school can always get priority projects accomplished every year. So, consider signing up soon. We haven't decided the format yet, but definitely to reach out to us. And just as a reminder, our contact
Te pone una
information
blusa, muchacha.
is grants@philsd.org.
All right, so just for our last couple of minutes, I just wanted to thank you all for being here and our presenters. In the chat, I just dropped the survey and a flyer. The survey is, again, you just take a minute to fill out the survey. It helps give us feedback and help see what you need or would want for continued sessions. If you're attending the next session, you want to make sure that you complete the survey before you switch over to your next link. And finally, the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is hosting a monthly series of lunch and learn events called Equity in Practice. The flyer for that is in the chat for more information. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your sessions today. And the email addresses for our facilitators are in the chat if you want to reach out to them directly. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, definitely reach out if you have any questions. If there's grants in the newsletter that you see that you need help with applying, then reach out to us as well. We're happy to do that. But enjoy the rest of your day off. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.